The masses have never thirsted after truth. They turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error if error seduce them. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their victim. The governments of the present day have to deal not merely with other governments, with emperors, kings, and ministers, but also with the secret societies which have everywhere their unscrupulous agents, and can at the last moment upset all the government's plans.
window of opportunity to lead in shaping a new world order for the 21st century.
In American foreign policy, are we at a special moment which is being redefined? Or are we creating a new world order?
Breaking tonight, 2 weeks into a Donald Trump presidency, and we are already seeing signs of a new world order.
This is a new world order that Trump has put in place because he's an advocate.
It's not just liberals who do that, John. It's not just liberals who do.
With Trump, I think you see the possibility, really for the first time ever, of a new world order that involves an even closer than before merger between the corporation and the state.
Trump's presidential Cadillac limo motorcade was called The Beast. This is a biblical title for the Antichrist. It is now in Biden's hands. The masses are duped. Politics is a show, a scripted charade. All presidents serve to establish the New World Order, or in Latin, Novus Ordo Seclorum.
And when they did that, they, as I've told you before, because I love it so much, they also created the Great Seal of the United States. And that Great Seal of the United States has on it Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order for the centuries, for the ages, forever.
The way we're going to win over the long term is not just militarily. We've got to win over hearts and minds. And what that means is we've got to invest in countries that have no educational infrastructure, have no means for young people to get ahead. We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
President Bush calls it the New World Order.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind. With few exceptions, the world now stands as one. The world can therefore seize this opportunity to fulfill the long-held promise of a new world order.
What is the New World Order? Well, when we talk about the New World Order, what we're talking about is a one-world government, a one-world religion, and a one-world financial system. Now, the reason why people refer to this as the New World Order is because if we think about it, the current world order, meaning the way things are in the world right now, is that we have separate nations, don't we? We have about 200 separate nations that are sovereign. They have power over their own affairs. They're not all united under one government. And when we think about the current religious state, we have a multitude of religions in this world. We have Christianity and all of its various facets and denominations, but we also have religions like Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and these religions are definitely not united. They're separate religions. That's the current order of things. Not only that, but we have different financial systems. Here we use the dollar. If we went to Mexico, we're using pesos. If we go to Canada, we're going to be on a different dollar, a Canadian dollar. All over the world, there are all these different currencies. So when we talk about the New World Order, we're talking about a world in which there's one government, where there's one religion, and one financial system.
New World Order is the headline in the Globe and Mail in Canada.
Is this global governance at last? Is it one world, the central bankers in charge? But aren't we all just living and dying for what the central banks do?
Of course we are. And we are absolutely slaves to central banks.
And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
I think you need a new world order that China has to be part of the process of creating it, and they have to buy in. They have to own it the same way as, let's say, the United States owns the Washington Consensus, the current order.
In times of crisis, the role of governments is more important and more relevant than ever.
You know, we are at an inflection point, I believe, in the world economy. Not just the world economy, in the world. occurs every 3 or 4 generations.
But the system we have now has actually broken down, only we haven't quite recognized it. And so you need to create a new one. And this is the time to do it.
And to look into constructive ways we can build our common future. Our futures are intrinsically connected to one another, as profound challenges to mankind, such as climate change, are globally interconnected and require collaborative responses.
And now is a time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it. And we've got to unite the rest of the free world in doing it.
I'm going to show you today how the Bible actually prophesies that one day there will be a one world government, a one world religion, and a one world financial system.
There is no doubt that Scripture warns of a new world order. There is no doubt about that.
Now, the Bible tells us to prove all things. So in order for me to get up here and make this kind of a claim that the Bible predicts that there's going to be this new world order, then I should be able to show you these things in the Bible. And the place where all three of these elements are found is right here in Revelation 13. So look down at your Bible, and first of all, in verse 7, I'm going to show you one world government in the Bible. In Revelation 13:7, speaking of the Antichrist, it says, "And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them.
And power was given him over all kindreds." Now, kindreds is talking about the different families of the earth. You know, you've heard of someone being, your next of kin. And then he says, and tongues, which the word tongue is just talking about languages, and nations. So there we see a one world power, a one world government, where one man, one system is given power over all kindreds and tongues and nations. That is the Bible outlining for us the coming one world government.
Look down at verse number 8 and you'll see the one world religion. It says in verse 8, "And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him." So we see all people in the earth. We see people who are living in India that today are Hindus, people who are living in the Middle East that today would be Islamic, people living in Western countries who call themselves Christians or Catholic or whatever they call themselves. We see people from all over the world, all nations, all languages, worshiping this man and proclaiming him to be basically God in the flesh. So we're already seeing it today, even before this happens, where religions are starting to merge in a sense and talk about putting aside their differences. If you jump down to verse 16, you'll see the one world financial system. Look at Revelation 13:16. "He causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. 666 is that number, the proverbial 666. And he says that no one on the planet of any nation, any tongue, any people, he says no man will be allowed to buy or sell without this mark. Well, that proves that the whole financial system is going to be united to be able to enforce that one rule for everybody. Nobody can buy or sell.
You can't buy without his permission, so there's a financial control of the world. One world currency, probably electronic. We already have paper dollars, which are worthless, except for the cost of the paper. Well, if it's electronic, now you even save the cost of the paper. You don't even have that. So there's going to be a political, a financial, and a religious control, a one world control of everybody.
That is different than what we have today. That is a new world order. That is a one world financial system. So all three of these elements are right here in Scripture. Yet there are people out there who, when you talk about the new world order or things of this nature, they say, "Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist," or you're some kind of a nut, you're paranoid. But wait a minute. Can you really be a Bible-believing Christian and just ignore Revelation 13 when it predicts that these exact things are going to come to pass?
And we are seeing it all come together rapidly now toward the fulfillment of this prophecy 2,000 years ago, headed for a one-world government, a one-world religion, a one-world currency. Satan's going to be the mastermind behind all of that.
The mark that Revelation 13, 16, 18 warns about is tied to a global economy. And if you don't have this mark, you cannot buy or sell anything. We saw the microchipping of Americans at 3 Square Market in 2017. It was recently revealed that the microchips will also go into your forehead. In 2022, they began to reveal their plan to microchip your brain.
Well, Elon Musk's next project isn't a car or a spaceship or a solar panel. The executive's latest startup is called Neuralink, which focuses on the goal of implanting chips into human brains and also connecting brains to computers. Here's what Elon Musk said at a conference in California about the technology last night.
This, I think, has a very good purpose, which is to cure important diseases and ultimately to help secure humanity's future as a civilization relative to AI. This, I think, has tremendous potential, and we hope to have this aspirationally in a human patient before the end of next year. So this is not far.
Right now, scientists in laboratories around the world are developing brain chips. Now, these are chips that can be inserted into the brain, and they are wireless. And that brain chip can restore your quality of life. Would you hesitate to get the chip? No, of course not. You would say, put the chip in my brain. Put the chip in my brain.
Put the chip in my brain.
Our brains we will no longer have universities as we have them today. That will change. Information will be on demand. Information will be commoditized. Knowledge will be commoditized. All of us will be smarter, have infinite amounts of storage, and infinite access to information. It will be unheard of. We will no longer be this isolated human being. We will be connected to everything. We will be connected to everything.
To everything.
Now, when we look back at today and we have to go to Baidu or Google and type it in, that will seem so primitive. Nobody will do that. You will just think, what knowledge do I need? And it will appear there for you to use. But it gets even weirder, stranger. Because we will not only be able to transfer knowledge, but we will be able to transfer memories. Now, so you could have an experience like skydiving, and all of a sudden you could transfer that experience to a friend, and all of a sudden they have experienced what you have experienced. It gets even weirder, because we will be living our lives as our lives. We know our lives and our memories, but you will all of a sudden have access to anybody's life who wants to make it available to you. People will open source their lives so others can download pieces of their lives and experience those things. That will be really strange. We won't know the difference between our own memory and a memory we acquired from someone else. Think about that. It gets even stranger. It will radically change how we perceive existence. So if you start to go down this path, you see, we won't even be, our life today will be totally alien to us.
The Bible warns of the eternal fate of those whom take the mark of the beast microchips. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever. And they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. The Bible is clear. We do not take anything into our hands or into our foreheads, especially when it is connected to a global cashless economy. The Satanic Transhumanist Agenda. Welcome to the New Age.
And this is the transhumanist cult. Everything they're doing is coming out of this plan. Here's just a few of the clips. You can't do it justice. Everything he says is just so freaking evil. Here it is.
And then the big political and economic question of the 21st century will be, what do we need humans for? Or at least, what do we need so many humans for?
Do you have an answer in the book?
At present, the best guess we have is keep them happy with drugs and computer games. Keep them happy with drugs and computer games.
And we call this the metaverse.
What you guys do in here?
Pretty much everything that you would do in the real world.
Or at least, what do we need so many humans for? Would constitute a new useless class. When I say that these are useless humans, it's not from the viewpoint of their mother, of the wife, or the son. Or at least, what do we need so many humans for?
First, we've got population. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Or at least, what do we need so many humans for?
Forget the conspiracy. Listen to our government agencies. These guys are telling the truth. You know, there's no conspiracy here, folks. Just get your damn vaccine.
All right. Thank you, doctor.
And COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance. If we want to stop this epidemic, we need not just to monitor people, we need to monitor what's happening under their skin. What we have seen so far, it's corporations and governments collecting data about where we go, who we meet, what movies we watch. The next phase is the surveillance going under our skin. We now see mass surveillance systems established even in democratic countries, which previously rejected them. And we also see a change in the nature of surveillance. Previously, surveillance was mainly above the skin. Now it's going under the skin. Governments want to know not just where we go or who we meet. Above all, they want to know what is happening under our skin. What's our body temperature? What's our blood pressure? What is our medical condition? Now humans are developing even bigger powers than ever before. We are really acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. We are really upgrading humans into gods. We are acquiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life. Humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over. Control of data might enable human elites to do something even more radical than just build digital dictatorships. By hacking organisms, elites may gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself. Science is replacing evolution by natural selection with evolution by intelligent design. Not the intelligent design of some god above the clouds, but our intelligent design. I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news. I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news. I know that in recent years, we saw populist politicians undermining deliberately the trust that people have in important institutions like universities, like respectable media outlets. These populist politicians told people that, say, scientists are these small elite...
So I apologize for subjecting you to that. That's only a small portion of it, but I wanted you to see what Dr. Zelenko was talking about. So what, obviously listeners know this is horrific, but what are we hearing here? Because this is a open, in my view, declaration of war against our very existence. And hey, he said, your free will, forget about it, it's gone. Well, that doesn't sound like something a good guy says to me, Dr. Zelenko.
You really want to know what motivates him?
What?
So he's a brilliant man. It's not... I think it's important to respect your adversary and their capabilities. He has a PhD from Oxford. He's influenced the most powerful people in the world. But what really motivates him is something much more simple. He's learned. He knows the Bible very well. And if he knows the Bible very well, he knows what God says, or what is stated in the Bible, what is right and what is wrong. Now, I'm going to say this not because I'm placing a value judgment, but because how he interprets it. Now, I personally believe people could live any way they want, and it's between them and God. So I'm not God's policeman. But he's a homosexual, and he's married to someone, a man whose name is Yitzhak. And he knows what the Bible, he mentioned it earlier, he has real problems with it. He knows what the Bible says about homosexuality. It's called an abomination. And it really, really pisses him off. And so from his worldview, it's not enough. Go live your life quietly, any way you want. No. He decided that he's going to take on God, and he's going to invalidate the concept of God in people's minds, because in his worldview, God cannot exist. Because if God exists and there's a right and wrong, then he has a big problem in his mind. There's this cognitive dissonance, and then there's this emotional turbulence and guilt, and he gets anxious. So literally the whole world has to suffer, because Yuval Noah Harari's sexual orientation is not in line with what he read in the Bible, and therefore he has to try to destroy God consciousness in humanity.
I mean, that's really exactly what it is. They are in rebellion against the code we've been given to be successful. We have free will to follow it or not. And he has decided to not just rebel, but to go 180 degrees in the opposite direction, which is extremely powerful because it's Antichrist. It's anti-human. It's anti-God consciousness.
And so, again, listen, we're all complex beings. I know I'm not perfect. Maybe you are, Alex. But,
no, I'm certainly not.
I have my demons that I have to deal with also. But I do it in private, and I try to work out my relationship with God in private. And I'm not judging Yuval Noah Harari until he takes the war against God into the world, and his policies will result in the extermination of 6.5 billion people, at least. And so this cannot be allowed to go on. His ideology and his arrogance to believe that human beings are now gods is incompatible with decency, incompatible with societal living, incompatible with God's will.
The Illuminati's New World Order is an ancient, old satanic conspiracy. All world leaders are puppets of the Illuminati, or they never reach that level of politics. The New Age is in reality the Satanic New Age, and they have written down their agendas for our children. The main targets are our children.
They're born into a culture that has long since rejected Christ and turned from the truth and turned to darkness. They're born into a culture that from day one begins to brainwash them and create within them what this culture thinks they ought to be. It's such a shame. It's such a shame tonight that you can't exercise absolute control over your child as to what it is, where it's educated, who its friends will be, whether it gets a shot or not, whether it goes here or whether it goes there. The Department of Human Services, DHS, will step in, and make no mistake about this tonight, and I warn you, I'm telling you, I'm warning you. If the government comes against you and wants to take your child away from you, they will take your children out of your home from underneath your nose while they are screaming and kicking. They'll drag them through the front door because the United States government has become Big Brother. Well, that's 10 years down the road, preacher. That's right now. All it takes is somebody bringing an accusation against you to the DHS, say something to the folks downtown, and they don't have to say anything to anybody. They can come in and take your child from your home immediately and put it in foster care until the issue's resolved. It ought not be so. The plan promotes New Age movement and religion, rituals, idolatry, reincarnation, fantasy books, and games, white magic, black magic, sorcery, shamanism, polytheism, occult symbols, objects and idols, psychology, UFOs and extraterrestrials, witchcraft and Satan worship, astrology and horoscope, tarot card reading, Ouija boards, palm readings, fire walking, seances, mediums, spirit channeling, holistic medicine, physical tests and sports, and guided imagery and visualization. Basically, these are occultic rituals, beliefs, practices, artifacts, and objects, including butchery, violence, and sex. Shows are full of sexual license, magic, sorcery, and satanic violence and evil. Satan and the New Age plan are after the children, especially children of Christian parents. They want to destroy Christianity from humanity. There is a shocking assault and all-out spiritual war being currently waged against the kids by Satan's demonic legions and his New Age leadership and their millions of disciples. There are 13 doctrines of the New Age movement. I want to be careful with these because I want you to hear them. This is very important. You will begin to identify with what I'm reading. 13 of them. Number 1, the children of the future will serve a one-world planetary government and live in a one-world culture. Number 2, patriotism to one's country must be abolished and all national barriers destroyed in order to build a one new world order. Number 3, children will accept that Eastern mystical religion is to be married to the Christianity of the West to forge a new, unified, social, and religious order of universal truths. You're seeing that right now. Number 4, teenagers and youth will rebel and revolt against their parents and against authority to help usher in the New Age world order. Number 5, youth and all of humanity must accept that the time will inevitably come when grown-ups who refuse to become part of the New Age will have to be killed. They are to be considered as lowly germs and infection or blot on humanity that must be stamped out and eradicated. Number 6, the traditional family unit is not desirable for the Aquarian or New Age. Children belong to the government, to the world and the community, the human group, not to their parents. A new kind of family unit must inevitably come into existence. Number 7, young people must be taught to believe in reincarnation and karma, the law of rebirth, rather than the resurrection and judgment teaching of the Bible. This belief must guide behavior, especially sexual conduct. Number 8, absurd and immature notions of sin and guilt must not be imparted to children by parents, teachers, pastors, and other adults. A more permissive and worldly attitude must be adopted. Number 9, children are to be taught that all religions, Christianity, witchcraft, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, paganism, etc., are equally worthwhile and that it doesn't matter in which God one believes. Number 10, the new generation of youth must recognize that Jesus did not come to save or convert anyone because no one is lost. When's the last time you heard some of these nationwide gurus calling themselves Christians say to anybody that you must be born again, that you're under the curse of Adam's sin, and that you've got to be saved by the grace of God? You haven't heard it and you won't. Number 11, Christian doctrines such as that of heaven, hell, and judgment must be discarded, and the theology of the Old Testament must be repudiated. Number 12, a New Age world religion must be established without Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. The Christian church is dead and must be replaced. Number 13, the coming New Age world religion will emphasize the unity of all religions while rejecting Jesus Christ's profound biblical statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The plot to decompose and destroy the family unit, subvert Bible doctrine, and promote a one-world New Age religion and government. The roots of New Age occultism can be traced all the way back to ancient Babylon. The unholy Trinity has three divinities: Father, Mother, Son. We see in these events the roots of several cardinal New Age doctrines: evolution, human divinity, spirit worship, reincarnation, and sexual license. And on and on and on it goes.
The Illuminati is the continuation of the ancient satanic mystery religions which King Nimrod continued after the global flood. They are Satan's priesthood, and they carry out Satan/Lucifer's orders. Generation after generation for millenniums, the quest for Satan's Antichrist one-world global government agenda has been forming. The Word of God has long exposed the satanic conspiracy. For this reason, science, education, media, entertainment, the world's governments have all conspired to conceal the truth of this satanic conspiracy from humanity. It's an information war. By controlling what you believe to be real, you can and will be mind-controlled. The Illuminati hate the Word of God because it exposes their satanic globalist agendas and exposes Satan's plans for humanity.
The Bible makes it clear that the world conspiracy is ultimately against God himself. King David wrote, "Why do the nations conspire, and the peoples plot in vain? Their kings revolt, their rulers plot together against the Lord and against the king he chose." Most researchers who investigate the New World Order at some point trace the movement back to Bavaria in the 18th century, to a man named Adam Weishaupt, a professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt, a school of the Roman Catholic Jesuit order. Some claim that Weishaupt himself was a Jesuit. Others say that he was not. Nevertheless, the influence of this powerful order is not to be overlooked. From their beginning with founder Ignatius Loyola in the 16th century, the Jesuits were a subversive organization known for their lust for power, because of which they were suppressed by popes and banished by kings no less than 30 times from the nations of Europe. So nefarious were they that the Marquis de Lafayette in 1799 said of them, "It is my opinion that if the liberties of this country, the United States of America, are destroyed, it will be by the subtlety of the Roman Catholic Jesuit priests, for they are the most crafty, dangerous enemies to civil and religious liberty. They have instigated most of the wars of Europe." Napoleon Bonaparte, while lamenting his exile on St. Helena, said, "The Jesuits are a military organization, not a religious order. And the aim of this organization is power. Power in its most despotic exercise, absolute power, universal power, power to control the world by the volition of a single man." Even President John Adams wrote these shocking words in a letter to Thomas Jefferson. Of the Jesuits, he said, "If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is this Society of Loyolas." It was among such men that Adam Weishaupt gained the skills that would one day earn him the credit of being called the profoundest conspirator that has ever existed. Weishaupt had his own lust for power and formed a secret society whose plan was to revolt against all established authority on earth. He codenamed himself Spartacus and called his society the Illuminati. The name Spartacus pertains to the ancient gladiator who rebelled against the tyranny of Rome, while the name Illuminati pertains to the greatest rebel of all time. Author Myron Fagan writes that Weishaupt himself said that the word Illuminati is derived from Lucifer and means holders of the light.
The Illuminati is so called because they are the illumined ones. And they are illumined through, according to their own definition of the term, they are illumined by an understanding of the occult sciences, of the satanic sciences, of the mysteries religions. They are illuminated. They are not illumined according to Scripture. Oh no. They are illumined according to occult doctrine, occult understanding, and occult power. And much of their occult power comes through an interaction with guiding spirits, which the Bible calls demons.
For they are the spirits of demons that go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. We read that Weishaupt began to write out the master plan that was designed to give the synagogue of Satan, so named by Jesus Christ, ultimate world domination, so they could impose the Luciferian ideology on the human race. But in order for Weishaupt to bring forth his new order, he needed to somehow destroy the old order. The method he chose was to bring about a world revolution. Professor John Robeson, who exposed the Illuminati in his work titled Proofs of a Conspiracy, published in 1798, wrote, "The true purpose of the order was to rule the world. To achieve this, it was necessary for the order to destroy all religions, overthrow all governments, and abolish private property." Because the average man would not openly follow a satanic plan, the agenda of the Illuminati was to be concealed through secret societies, some of which traced themselves back thousands of years. It was these same powers that Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli warned were contending against the governments of the world.
This plan that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, tends to be kept in the bowels of these blood oath secret societies. And by that I mean the Shriners, the Freemasons, the Oddfellows, the Illuminati, the Order of the Palladian. There are literally dozens of names down throughout the centuries that this goes by. But it has to be in one of these groups where you have to swear to kill a fellow member of the society if they reveal the secrets, or you yourself be killed by a member of the society if you reveal the secrets. That's what blood oaths are. And they start out bad, but they get worse as you go up in the organization.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322. You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Weishaupt saw in the ancient orders of Freemasonry an opportunity to commission foot soldiers for his cause of world domination. He wrote that none is fitter than the 3 lower degrees of Freemasonry. The public is accustomed to it, expects little from it, and therefore takes little notice of it.
Weishaupt felt that Masonry was the easiest way to get a good Christian guy on the path of destruction, essentially, where you can have him take little baby steps on this path. It's a system they've been working on for thousands of years. They've really got it down. They know how to gradually, gently corrupt people from Christendom, first of all, to deism. Of course, deism is where, yes, God started the world, but then he took off, and he has no place in the affairs of men now. And so you don't have to worry about God, you don't have to worry about heaven and hell. You just kind of do your thing, and everything will be okay. Deism to atheism is the next step. Atheism, where you claim there is no God, and then, of course, the next step is out and out Satanism. And interestingly enough, Satanists know there's God, know there's a heaven and hell, and they just choose hell, and they choose to drag as many people into hell as they can. Yes, Masons were instrumental in the founding of this country. A large percentage of the founding fathers were Masons, but that doesn't mean that a large percentage of the founding fathers were evil men. You have to look at Masonry as a way to get good Christians, to lure good Christians gradually over to deism, to atheism, and eventually to Satanism. That's the purpose of Freemasonry. It's to lure good people into these evil roads. Why? Because if you have an evil secret society where you're trying to create the Antichrist here on earth, not many people are going to come and join up. So you have to convince them that they're doing something good for the world, gradually get them in, and little by little try to corrupt them.
Weishaupt gained the allegiance of low-level Masons by telling them that the Illuminati held the true sense of Christianity. "Behold our secret," he said, "if in order to destroy all Christianity, all religion, we have pretended to have the sole true religion, remember that the end justifies the means. Because of this, some have argued that Weishaupt corrupted Freemasonry.
He didn't have to corrupt Masonry. Masonry is a corruption skateboard ready-made for his purposes. There's no difference with what Weishaupt did. He just put a name to it and he got caught. That's the only difference. That whole system, this what do you want to call it? A sleigh ride into hell, descent into hell, has always been in existence. It's just Masonry formalized it, categorized it, worked on it, perfected it, and then Weishaupt came along and said, well, now how do we make him go a little faster? That's all he did.
The religion of Masonry, while often cloaked with Christian titles, is actually based upon the ancient mystery religion of Babylon and Egypt. These same mysteries governed the worship of Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. The mysteries are often symbolized by the all-seeing eye, sometimes called the eye of God. But the God of Masonry is not the same as the God of the Bible. None was more adamant about this point than the man considered by many to be the most influential Mason of all time, Albert Pike.
Albert Pike was a Confederate Civil War general who was the head of American Freemasonry in the post-Civil War period. He's certainly the most important American Mason. His book, Morals and Dogma, is required reading for every Freemason.
He says on page 624, the 28th degree, Teachings of the 28th Degree, he says, quote, Masonry is identical with the ancient mysteries. Okay? And then he goes on, he says, we reproduce the speculations of the philosophers, the Kabbalists, the mystics, and the Gnostics, unquote. Well, these were all systems, religious systems, that worshipped Lucifer.
Pike probably mistakenly reveals his true intent because he speaks of Lucifer frequently.
When he says we are identical to all the mysteries, the mysteries were all brought under God's condemnation and destroyed at one point or another in history. From the Babylonian mysteries to the Egyptian mysteries to the peoples living in the land of Canaan. When the major reason God destroyed them, He ordered them to be killed, man and women and child. They were all worshiping Satan.
Now see, Masons distinguish between Lucifer and Satan. Masons believe that Lucifer is the light bearer, the good God, and that the Christian God is called Adonai, the evil God. They use as their justification that if the Christian God was a good God, then there wouldn't be this Garden of Eden problem where because you ate of the apple, now you have to suffer and you have to, the sweat of your brow, you have to make your living. Women have to give birth in pain, etc. No good father would do that to his children. So the Christian God is the evil God, where Lucifer is the good God because he'll give you everything you want. He'll fulfill your every desire.
In 1908, French occult expert Copin Albancelli wrote, certain Masonic societies exist which are satanic, not in the sense that the devil comes to preside at their meetings, but in that their initiates profess the cult of Lucifer. They adore him as the true God, and they are animated by an implacable hatred against the Christian God whom they declare to be an impostor. Perhaps Albert Pike's most famous and controversial quote is this one. The true and pure philosophic religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai. But Lucifer, God of light, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil. Because of this, occult author Edith Starr Miller wrote, Luciferian occultism controls Freemasonry. It is important to remember that the lower ranks of Masonry are largely unaware of the deception of their leaders. Master Mason Manly P. Hall, who said that when the Mason learns the mystery of his craft, the seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands, also made it clear that Freemasonry is a fraternity within a fraternity, an outer organization concealing an inner brotherhood of the elect. Meanwhile, Albert Pike wrote in his famous Morals and Dogma that symbols are displayed to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine that he shall understand them. Jesus said, I spoke openly to the world, and in secret have I said nothing. Nevertheless, secret societies by their very nature openly reject the example of Christ. As Albincelli wrote, it is professed in these societies that all that the Christian God commands is disagreeable to Lucifer. In consequence, one must do all that the Christian God forbids, and one must shun like fire all that he commands. Even to gain entrance into these societies, a man must violate the commandment of God. For the Lord has said, make no oath at all, either by heaven or by the earth, nor shall you make an oath by your head. But let your statement be, yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than these comes from the evil one. As we shall see, this rejection of God and his Son Jesus Christ has been the driving force behind the world revolution and the growing tide of tribulation that has afflicted mankind for more than 2 centuries. While Christ said, I spoke openly to the world, Albert Pike declared that Masonry conceals its secrets from all except the adepts and sages, or the elect. According to the Masonic Cyclopedia, an adept is a name given to the order of the Illuminati. With their common interest in Lucifer, secrecy, and a desire for world domination, we read that after lengthy negotiations between Weishaupt and members of Masonry, an agreement was reached on December 20th, 1781, to combine the 2 orders. A conscientious Mason named the Comte de Verrou, who attended this secret meeting at the Congress of Wilhelmsbad in Germany, later warned in his biography, saying, all this is very much more serious than you think. The conspiracy which is being woven is so well thought out that it will be impossible for the monarchy and the church to escape it. Despite the fears of the Comte de Verrou, the Word of God makes it clear that the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. Yet we read that, according to his biographer, from that point forward, the Comte de Verrou could only speak of Freemasonry with horror. In the 1920s, historian Nesta Webster wrote of this conspiracy, saying, it was by this terrible and formidable sect that the gigantic plan of world revolution was worked out, a program hitherto unprecedented in the history of civilization. Communistic theories had been held by isolated thinkers or groups of thinkers since the days of Plato, but no one, as far as we know, had ever yet seriously proposed to destroy everything for which civilization stands. Moreover, the plan of Illuminism has continued up to the present day. In 1784, the Illuminati were exposed by the Bavarian government, who issued an edict forbidding all secret societies. They seized documents which exposed the workings of the order and became convinced that they were planning to take over the world by way of revolution. So concerned were they issued an official document to the governments of Europe called the Original Writings of the Order of the Illuminati. Sadly, the powers of Europe did not take the warning or the Illuminati seriously. In 1790, the famed occultist and magician Cagliostro was arrested by the Inquisition in Rome. He told them that he had been initiated into the Illuminati in 1783 and was shown a book which stated that Illuminism was a conspiracy directed against thrones and altars, and that the first blows were to attain France.
The first Illuminist overthrow of a nation was the French Revolution.
Most of us in our world history classes were pretty much taught that the French Revolution was glorious and that the French monarchy was terrible, and so the public finally rose up and broke into the Bastille and took the guns and went out and had a revolution and kicked out the monarchs. That's what we grow up with, but that's not the fact of the matter.
a group of radicals surfaced in France known as the Jacobin clubs that were organized under the direct inspiration of the Bavarian Illuminati. In 1793, Alois Hoffmann, the editor of the Vienna Journal, wrote, "I shall never cease to repeat that the French Revolution has come from Masonry and the Illuminati." The Jacobins vowed to destroy the monarchy and sought to establish what they called a new world order.
The French government was the most liberal in all of Europe, was the least likely to be in need of a revolution.
In 1789, an artificial shortage of grain was created by Illuminist manipulations of the grain market. This produced a famine so intense that it brought the nation to the edge of revolt. The conspirators held up the food supplies and blocked all reforms in the National Assembly to exacerbate the situation, and the populace starved. With the Jacobin propaganda, the people blamed the monarchy, King Louis XVI, and his queen, Marie Antoinette. Antoinette is famous for having said, "Let them eat cake," in response to the starvation of the people. But modern research has exposed the phrase was set down earlier by philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau in 1766, while Marie Antoinette was only 10 years old. As one source writes, the saying was attributed to Marie Antoinette in 1789 by radical agitators who were trying to turn the populace against her. As a result of such lies and propaganda, King Louis XVI and his queen were overthrown and murdered on behalf of the revolution. King Louis seems to have been a more compassionate ruler than historians often credit him for. When the revolutionaries broke into the royal palace, his Swiss guard was slain because they were ordered not to fire upon the people. At his execution, Louis said, "I pardon those who have occasioned my death, and I pray to God that the blood you are going to shed may never be visited on France." The Bible says concerning governing authorities, there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resists the power, resists the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. While pretending to fight for the rights of the people, the Jacobins with their satanic agenda became more bloody and tyrannical than most monarchies have ever been. Terror was rampant in the streets of Paris. The full horror of government by Satanism was being played out, complete with human butcherings and cannibalism. During the Reign of Terror, approximately 18,000 citizens were sent to the guillotine, and many more died in prison without being formally brought to trial. Adam Weishaupt sent his hand-picked representative into Paris, a man named Anacharsis Cloots. Cloots arrogantly claimed to be the orator of mankind and called himself the personal enemy of Jesus Christ. He then set about to remove all traces of Christianity from France. He even abolished Sunday and attempted to create his own calendar. But perhaps the most ghastly and horrific element of the French Revolution was a program that would set a pattern for wicked governments ever after. In 1793, the revolutionary leaders embarked upon a fearful new project called depopulation.
They attempted to reduce the population of France, which at the time was 25 million, they decided they were going to reduce that down to 16 million. Why? Because there was high unemployment as a result of the French Revolution. So their answer to unemployment was kill about 9 million people.
The Jacobins toiled over maps and selected in each region the number of citizens to be murdered. In Nantes, 500 children were killed in one butchery, and 144 poor women who sewed shirts for the army were thrown into the river. Stone quarries were a favorite site for mass extermination, and it was said that many quarry operators had to shut down due to the piles of bodies. While the depopulation program failed to achieve its goal of slaughtering 9 to 17 million people, the death toll taken at the time records about 300,000 murdered. More than a century later, Adolf Hitler would refer to his Nazi movement as the exact counterpart of the French Revolution. Dr. Brzezinski, the former National Security Advisor in 1993, estimated that in the 20th century, 167 to 175 million lives were deliberately extinguished by politically motivated carnage. Many have come to believe that such carnage began with the Jacobin depopulation program. In time, the Jacobins desired to foment a second revolution in America.
They wanted to bring the French Revolution over to America, which was after the American Revolution. But the American Revolution didn't turn out the way the French Revolution did. Christianity remained very strong and a strong part of the new American government, where religion was eliminated in France by the French Revolution. So the French didn't like that. They wanted to come and have re-revolution in America.
In 1785, the Columbian Lodge of the Order of the Illuminati was established in New York City. Oddly enough, the Illuminati were supported by some Americans, most notably Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson publicly defended Adam Weishaupt and attacked those who wrote exposures of the Illuminati. Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, charged that Jefferson had helped to foment the French Revolution, while the Reverend Jedediah Morse, the father of Samuel B. Morse, who invented the telegraph, declared that Jefferson was an Illuminatus. Like Weishaupt and those who began the French Revolution, Jefferson had his own contempt for the gospel of Jesus Christ and set about to write his own version of it, now known as the Jefferson Bible. In a letter to John Adams, he wrote, "In the New Testament, there is internal evidence that parts of it have proceeded from an extraordinary man, and that other parts are of the fabric of very inferior minds. It is as easy to separate those parts as to pick out diamonds from dunghills." Among those parts of the gospel that Jefferson considered to be dunghills were things like the virgin birth, the miracles of Jesus, and the resurrection of Christ, about which the Apostle Paul wrote, "If Christ be not raised, your faith is in vain." Yet all of these things were cut out of Jefferson's version of the New Testament. In the Bible, God says, "Ye shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish anything from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you." The Bible also says, "If any man preach any other gospel, let him be accursed." Concerning the book of Revelation, Jefferson wrote, "It is between 50 and 60 years since I read it, and I then considered it merely the ravings of a maniac, no more worthy nor capable of explanation than the incoherences of our own nightly dreams." Jefferson's tombstone seems to best define his true faith, an Egyptian obelisk that he himself designed prior to his death. Like the all-seeing eye, the obelisk is a symbol of the ancient mystery religion, the same worship of Freemasonry and the Illuminati. The idea of the Illuminati, or of a plan for the overthrow of nations, was not always considered the stuff of conspiracy theorists and fanatics. It was written of by men like George Washington. So concerned was Washington over the Jacobin threat in America that he came out of retirement and again accepted the appointment of Commander-in-Chief of the Army to fight against the movement. In a letter to the Reverend W.D. Schneider in 1798, Washington wrote, "I have heard of the nefarious and dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati. It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more fully satisfied of this fact than I am." There are many such references concerning the presence of Illuminism in America. Reportedly, Harvard's Houghton Library contains numerous sermons, pamphlets, and books denouncing Illuminism or the Illuminati during the late 1790s and early 1800s. Warnings were even preached in churches, such as this 1812 sermon by the Reverend Joseph Willard, who said, "There is sufficient evidence that a number of societies of the Illuminati have been established in this land of gospel light and civil liberty, which were first organized from the Grand Society in France. They are doubtless secretly striving to undermine all our ancient institutions, civil and sacred. In 1885, Monsignor George Dillon wrote, "Communism is but a form of the illuminated masonry of Weishaupt." The Russian Revolution, like the revolution in France, is often portrayed as the noble struggle of just men desiring to overthrow an unjust monarchy. But as with Weishaupt and his inspired French revolt, a conspiracy against God is to be found at the very heart of it. In his book, Marx and Satan, author Richard Wurmbrand exposes the truth about the man most credited with the communist idea. Marx began his life as a professing Christian, even writing a poem titled "The Union of the Faithful with Christ" in favor of Christianity. But by the time he finished high school, somehow his heart had turned. In another poem he wrote, "I wish to avenge myself against the one who rules above." In a poem titled "Pale Maiden," Marx wrote, "Thus heaven I forfeited, I know it full well, my soul once true to God is chosen for hell." But Marx was not alone in his thoughts of damnation. He surrounded himself with like-minded fellows at the Internationale, a working man's association with a secret agenda. French historian E. Freiberg wrote, "The Internationale everywhere found support in Freemasonry," while author William T. Still writes that the Internationale can hardly be viewed as anything but Illuminized Masonry in a new disguise. Among Marx's comrades were men like Mikhail Bakunin, who wrote, "The evil one is the satanic revolt against divine authority. Satan, the eternal rebel, the first free thinker and the emancipator of worlds." Then there was Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who wrote, "Come, Satan, slandered by small and by kings. God is stupidity and cowardice. God is hypocrisy and falsehood. God is evil." Or Heinrich Heine, called the intimate friend of Marx, who wrote, "I called the devil and he came. His face with wonder I must scan. He is not ugly, he is not lame. He is a delightful, charming man." Wurmbrand writes that Marx and his comrades, while anti-God, were not atheists as present-day Marxists claim to be. That is, while they openly denounced and reviled God, they hated a God in whom they believed. When the revolution broke out in Paris in 1871, the Communard Florins declared, "Our enemy is God. Hatred of God is the beginning of wisdom." Marx greatly praised the Communards, who openly proclaimed this aim. Such was the thinking of the men whose influence would change the world through communism. As Nesta Webster wrote, the Internationale became simply an engine of warfare against civilization. Just as the Jacobin Club had openly executed the hidden plan of the Illuminati, the Internationale, holding within it the same terrible secrets, carried on the work of world revolution. This revolution would next enter into Russia to overthrow Tsar Nicholas II and his family, who were brutally murdered on July 17, 1918. As with the French Revolution, the powers that took over were far more bloodthirsty and cruel than any monarch in Russia's history. The two chief instruments, Lenin and Trotsky, inspired a civil war that cost 28 million Russian lives. When Joseph Stalin inherited Lenin's legacy, he would be called the most dictatorial and murderous tyrant the world had ever known. His own daughter said of him, quote, "A terrible demon had taken possession of my father's soul." It is now estimated by Soviet sources that Stalin's reign of terror killed 40 million Russians, a far greater death toll than what is so often attributed to Adolf Hitler. Sources claim that Europeans and Americans financed Lenin and Trotsky in their attempts to foment a revolution in Russia. Many have seen in this a global conspiracy. Among them was a young Winston Churchill, who made this statement where he tied it all together in a London newspaper in 1920. He said, "From the days of Spartacus Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx to those of Trotsky, this worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization has been steadily growing. It played a definitely recognizable role in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century. And now, at last, This band of extraordinary personalities from the underworld of the great cities of Europe and America have gripped the Russian people by the hair of their heads and have become practically the undisputed masters of that enormous empire. Yet in 1945, Churchill would be among the 3 leaders at the infamous meeting at Yalta, an historic event that many argue was a gigantic push for the New World Order. Is it possible that somehow Churchill's youthful convictions changed 25 years later? For now he would sit in support of the very movement he sought to expose. The Soviet Union, under the bloody leadership of Joseph Stalin, was given power over half of Europe, a decision that would later lead to the murder of countless millions. It is said this was largely due to the efforts of Franklin D. Roosevelt. FDR was also responsible for putting the Masonic seal on the back of the U.S. dollar bill, with the all-seeing eye and the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, translated by many researchers as the New World Order. The Reverend Jim Shaw, a former 33rd degree Mason who left the order and wrote his book titled The Deadly Deception, was interviewed by a reporter in 1989. We read that, concerning the famous picture at the Yalta Conference, Reverend Shaw said, and there they were, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, all 3 Masons. Some may suggest that Yalta was simply the poor judgment of men who did not realize what they were doing. But is it possible that a much greater agenda was at work? In 1830, Adam Weishaupt died at the age of 82. In time, the power of Masonry and the Illuminati fell into the hands of 2 chief men, Albert Pike in the United States and a man named Giuseppe Mazzini, the head of Italian Masonry, who is alleged to have said, quote, "Our final end is that of Voltaire and of the French Revolution, the destruction forever of the Christian idea." Together, Pike and Mazzini devised a diabolical plan to finally bring about the New World Order. In 1871, Mazzini issued a letter in which he outlined the final 3-part plan for ridding not just Europe, but the entire world of Christianity, bringing it under the illuminated dictatorship of Luciferianism. Here in Washington, D.C., beneath a statue of Albert Pike, author William T. Still explains the contents of this remarkable letter.
This was a letter that was written by the head of European Masonry, a man by the name of Mazzini, who wrote it to Albert Pike about 1871. It was in the British Museum for a number of years on display, so we know it existed. It's now disappeared, incidentally. The subject of the letter was to try to figure out a way to finally get humankind to give up their cherished concept of nationalism and finally give in to the New World Order internationalist construct. The letter called for a series of 3 world wars. The first war would be to depose the Tsar in Russia so they could create an experiment in the control of populations, have a nation to do that in. Then the Second World War would allow this new nation to take control of Europe. Of course, they only got half of Europe, but that was the best they could do under the conditions after World War II. Then the Third World War would be between the Jews and the Muslims and would bring about the Battle of Armageddon, and would finally make mankind so sick of warfare that they'd give up their cherished concept of nationalism and give in to the New World Order concept.
Arise, the New World Religion. The spirit of the false prophet is here. But I want to start with the scripture, and we're looking, of course, at Revelation 13, and I'm looking at the second beast, not the Antichrist. I'm looking today at the second beast, who I think is very much underrated, but less discussed. Sharing this chapter with the Antichrist is extremely important, and I think we often miss it. From verses 11 to 18, just to get the concept. And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had the power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth, this is the false prophet here, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, I never really thought about that. The fact that the first beast comes, yes, he appears on the scene, and he's the one we often talk about all the time. But I want to bring out this point about the false prophet. There are two of them that are turning up, because it's the beast, isn't it, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and of course the dragon, which is Satan, which of course make up a false trinity, a counter-trinity. And note verse 12. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast. He has no power of his own. He's rather like a vice president. You know, the president delegates his powers, possibly for a time. We know truly that when the president isn't in the White House, the vice president takes over. And in a sense, I see the false prophet a little bit like that. He seems to be the Antichrist's court magician, the one that will exercise the powers, exercise the miracles, the lying wonders. And he goes on and he says here in verse 12, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He's the one that causes the people to worship. He's the deceiver. He's the one, not the Antichrist. He's the one that is the one that will be ultimately worshipped, that Satan will obviously be the one worshipped through the Antichrist. And so he's exercising this power like a vice president. He's the one who whispers in the ear of the Antichrist, isn't he? Verse 14 makes it quite clear here that he does this in the presence of the Antichrist. Note this. He deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. In the sight of the beast. Take note of those words. We often don't note them, do we? He's the one who will be the court magician in front of the Antichrist. Here's my miracle worker here, the Antichrist will say. Look at what he can do. Look at the fire he can bring down from heaven. Look at what powers he has. But of course, he won't be pointing to him because he's lauding him. He'll be pointing to him because he, the Antichrist, is the one that holds in his hand the people. And he uses the false prophet to bring these things about. He's the one who will outwork these things. So, he does the miracles in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast. He doesn't point to himself. He says, you must make an image to the Antichrist because of the wonders of the fact that he had a deadly wound and was healed. Since March 2020, an army of religious spirits have been released to prepare the world for Antichrist worship. You might say, why religious? But let's define a religion for a start. A religion is a power that is superhuman and controlling. It's a superhuman controlling power. That's the belief, isn't it, that we have. If we belong to a religion, we believe in a controlling power. To certain kinds of people, that controlling power has nothing to do with being superhuman. You might like to write these down. Rationalism. Rationalism really born out of the philosophers. The idea of reasoning. Very much, of course, back in I think it was the 17th century and late 18th century Enlightenment, when men began to wake up to various ideas. And of course, it was expressed in poetry and expressed in art. With rationalism, it has that. The base of rationalism is that it has no emotion in it. It has no sense of instinct. It develops through the mind. It's basically opinions that are based on man's knowledge and fed to the masses. A form of rationalism, a form of ideology. There are all kinds of ideas that are rational, but they have no supernatural element to them. But yet they can become a religion. Secondly, related to it, the other ism, intellectualism. power of the mind to analyze rather than to recognize the spiritual reality. The idea of picking apart something with your mind and coming up with a certain idea, again, devoid of emotion. Usually somebody that intellectualizes has a rather dead spirit. They don't have that sense of anything that could be outside of the box. It all has to fit into neat little packages related directly to rationalism. But intellectualism has a snobbishness about it. It has a sense of pride about it. And looking at the false prophet, he's been at work, the spirit of the false prophet. I'm not saying necessarily only the actual man, the false prophet, but the spirit of the false prophet, as I'm alluding to the title here, is really the spirit that has been pervading the world. And as we know, many antichrists, many false prophets have gone out into the world and are now going out into the world. But intellectualism, using the power of rational thinking, intellectualism and rationalism, the power of the mind, a dead spirit, all these are tools that the devil has been using and putting out through false prophets. What's the false prophecy being spread about today in the world? Environmentalism. Environmentalism is a false concept of protecting the earth against what they consider, or what is considered, to be harmful. We know, of course, that carbon is now the new enemy. Global powers want to get rid of carbon, don't they? They want us to all not be using any fossil fuels. The idea, the concept that we can destroy or get rid of the very basis of life on this planet, which is carbon-based life. And so comes the idea of removing something that seems to be harmful. The important thing here to note is the fact that it isn't harmful. It's a lie. It's a false prophecy. You know, you've got these ladies in the American Congress who are declaring the world is going to end in 12 years and we need to do something about the environment. There you get Prince Charles standing up. Last chance saloon. Oh dear, what are we going to do? The world is about to end. And they bring this hysterical spirit with them, don't they? This concept that everything is going to finish. Yes, there have been species that we've lost. Yes, land has been lost to the sea. Ice sheets have melted to some degree. But we've seen these things happen, haven't we, across the centuries? We've seen cycles of climate change, cycles of different things happening, ice ages, warm places. And so environmentalism becomes another form of religion. And so people are out on the streets demonstrating. Extinction Rebellion, get rid of that carbon, that nasty stuff. People are starting to believe that. And the message, of course, goes out to the masses. It's always the feeding to the masses. The people that will buy a newspaper and then just glance at the headlines. Oh, yes, of course we do. We need to really get rid of carbon, don't we? Yes, it's very harmful. We don't realize that actually it's a form of suicide. Nations at the moment are trying to deplete their energy systems of fossil fuels in favor of things like wind. Nuclear power, of course, these things are useful to completely get rid of a fuel. But really, let's face it, the false prophets at work here. It's an excuse, isn't it, to bring everybody into a particular paradigm, into a particular form of thinking. And of course, carbon taxes are going to be enormous. They're going to push people, aren't they, with financial penalties. But you're going to pay carbon taxes if your business is putting out too much carbon. Your footprint is too large. Environmentalism, another false concept put out by the Antichrist and his false prophet, the spirit of the Antichrist. And the real ones are coming, yes, but aren't there many Antichrists? Those that are preaching this message. Ism number 4, safetyism. Now all these you can find on the internet. Safetyism, this is a new one. Designated safe spaces against hate speech, protecting the lie. Satan has to protect his lies, so he has to cut out, he has to censor, doesn't he, everything that is against his narrative. And this is the spirit now since March 2020, since these religious spirits have been released into the earth at a rapid pace. Safetyism. Oh, we can't have that person speaking in the university because they're going to go against what we believe. And they might just give us some ideas that we don't want. So let's protect ourselves. This is why we're seeing the big tech platforms, aren't we? Censored. You see, safetyism. You mustn't hear that message because it might damage you. The powers above, the powers that be, don't want you to hear it. They want you only to hear the message of their prophets, their one-stream narrative. They want to protect the lie. And of course, this is getting bigger and bigger. We have to find ways around these things. And in time to come, there'll be other platforms that I'll be looking for to avoid the safetyism, scientism. Only the science that they determine is truth. Follow the science. Evolution, of course, has been taught, hasn't it, in schools for many, many decades. Those of you who might have watched it, I don't know. These films, these Hollywood films, tend to form ideas in the minds of people. And of course, now in the United States and schools, the creation story isn't taught as scientific fact. So one man's expertise is what's listened to, isn't it? Since March 2020, we know who those experts are that come on the mainstream media. And what do they say? Follow the science. Follow the science like it's some sort of a religion, some sort of religious concept, scientism. But of course, it's the scientism that they want you to believe in, the one that they determine is their truth. We know, of course, that experts can be found in many, many areas. There are experts and there are experts. The false prophet and the false prophets that have come before him. Maybe the false prophet is alive today, I don't know. But he's ushering in this new religion. The new religion of rationalism, intellectualism, environmentalism, safetyism, and scientism. This is emerging. And it's a conglomeration of all these things. It isn't just the one. It's the mixture of all these things together. And this is the spirit of the New World Order. And we know the men that are propagating it. Governmentalism. What do I mean by that? Well, the expansion of the state's rule and the whole idea that power belongs in the hands of the elite, in the hands of the state. Because we're very much seeing that now, aren't we? In a situation where the state is dictating to the lives of men and women, telling you how to bring up your children, telling you what must go into the minds of your children, telling you what must go into the bodies of your children. Of course, those of you that live in Australia will know the mandates and how children have been taken from families and in many respects just given this thing without any consent from the parent. The parent's opinion doesn't matter. So governmentalism expands the power of the state in every area until we become state dependent. Those of you that might have heard of the term universal basic income. All this is stemming out of governmentalism. And at the back of it, of course, is the other thing which is known as global governance. Global governance, the idea that the whole world can come under one system. And of course, we're beginning to see that developing, aren't we? The power of the state. And it doesn't just go into the way we live. It gets into the way we think. The ideas behind the way we think. It's becoming really, really serious because people are not thinking for themselves anymore. They're beginning to say, well, the government knows best. If you're putting your trust in men, you're really going down a sorry path because all men, unfortunately, don't have the Spirit of God. And therefore they won't be able to lead you in the right pathway. They'll be able to only lead you in pathways that in the end pander to their own ambitions. We see this all the time in politics. How many times haven't governments promised in their manifestos that they're going to do this for us, they're going to do that for us, it's going to be great. And when it comes to it, of course, they don't actually keep those promises. But nevertheless, we are deceived into thinking that the state is the thing that runs our lives. No consent comes from the people. And that's when we see the destruction of democracy. And we're, of course, beginning to see that across the Western world now. And the way that these mandates are being imposed heartlessly. This is the power of the state working. They have the media at their side, don't they? To twist everything, make it look as though that what they're saying is what is the majority opinion. And of course the media know how to pump that out. So, governmentalism. The enemy's got one strategy, and he often couches it in different words. And another one here is, you might not have heard of stakeholder capitalism. Well, we all know what capitalism is, don't we? The idea, concept of free enterprise, being able to work in the market in a situation where we have what's known as a meritocracy. That's the real purpose of capitalism, is that those that can work for themselves, those that can use their own initiative and gain advantages in business, The concept of capitalism, of course, goes back centuries. The concept of markets and the way that markets run and the way that people can earn individual livings. But Klaus Schwab, again, the leader of the World Economic Forum, I just want to say to you, if you haven't researched the World Economic Forum, please go on their website and read what their stated intentions are. And one of them is stakeholder capitalism. And it's the idea that everybody's involved. This is the lie. Everybody's involved in creating a new world. The concept of ownership starts to disappear. And here, of course, we start to see the overlaps with the communist system, the idea of being dependent on the state. Stakeholder capitalism. It says this: you will own nothing and be happy. That is Klaus Schwab's intention. He doesn't really want you to be owning anything. But the lie that they don't tell you is that the elites, just that little small cabal of people, they're the ones that are going to be the owners, the controllers, the ones that actually control the markets. And as we've seen in the last 2 years, the wanton destruction, the deliberate and willful destruction of small business, that has been at the heart of what they've been trying to create at the World Economic Forum. By destroying small business and enterprise, you get rid of that meritocracy. You get rid of the concept of people being able to work for themselves. And then the idea is that we're all part of a greater good. It's what's known as utilitarianism. And this greater good will be a wealth distribution process. And it will help the third world to improve and all that kind of thing. But you will own nothing and be happy. You'll be living in a smart city. You'll have all the tools and gadgets that you possibly need. And you'll have the state thinking for you. And you'll have men like Klaus Schwab, who basically have been at the bottom of training up the present world leadership that we have. He actually boasts about it in one of his videos. He says that Justin Trudeau, even Vladimir Putin, Emmanuel Macron, he claims that these people all went through what he calls his young people's training school for global governance. He openly boasts about it. There's no hiding this anymore. They're open about what they want to do, about their plans. But they don't really want to include you as a stakeholder. This is an elite cabal, and they've got their own plans. I call it new communism, because again, it ties up with stakeholder capitalism. Again, it's trusting the state, but this time it's all about information. What do the communists do? What is the way that they operate in order to get their people to comply? And it's the one word, isn't it, that we all know: propaganda. Propaganda works in a certain way. It doesn't want you to understand what is really happening. And so they present two things to you: misinformation and disinformation. Now, sometimes it's difficult to actually discern the difference between the two. But the communist states have always operated like that. If you look at the way the Soviet Union has operated, their newspaper that used to be called Pravda was just basically lies from start to finish. As people would read the newspapers, as they do today in the media, people will pick up a headline and they will say, yes, that's absolutely the truth. I follow that newspaper, maybe because it has a liberal bent or it has a conservative bent. But what's happening, of course, at the moment really is that these papers are really just following the line that they're told to follow. And so in new communism, the state provides everything for you. It fills your mind with their propaganda, and it also holds you financially. The state will provide your finances. Those of you that maybe are not fortunate enough to be in a highly skilled job and that have found yourself out of work in the last couple of years and sustained by the state. And have you noticed that the state has got endless resources? They can provide and provide and provide. They can just print the money off and they can keep everything tuned up and going. Of course, there's a bill to pay at the end, but that's not what they're telling you. And so people that are on the side of this new communism, as I call it, are operating inside the system that thinks that they're being protected, that the state seems to have endless resources. And their propaganda machine, of course, will keep churning out what they want you to hear all the time. This is happening today. They want to get you to a place where you believe everything the government says, you trust the science, you trust their ideas, and you just roll along with it. There's no place for the truth. And in the new communism, it's slightly different. There's a merger going on between one particular religion and another, a tolerance level that goes beyond tolerance, to the point now where we're starting to say, well, we can maybe start to throw aside some of these shackles. Our minds are being cultivated to think in that way. And so we live in also what's known as this post-truth era, isn't it? And it seems to come at us now from many sides. And we can see that people have their own facts. We're living in an era where truth is relative. But those of us who actually follow and walk with the Lord Jesus Christ know that isn't the case. We know that we follow a Bible, a word of God that contains truth. Truth is either this or it's that. There's no grey areas in between. The stated goal of Klaus Schwab, he actually drops this into many of his speeches. The idea of transhumanism. And transhumanism, of course, connected to the technocracy and what you might call technocentrism that is now pervading our society. We're now from Silicon Valley, the development of the computer, the concept that the internet is becoming now, of course, all pervasive, isn't it? Everywhere. The transhuman stage. That smartphone isn't needed anymore. That it's all in here. This has all been downloaded to the cloud, downloaded to that great brain of computerization, completed. That man and computer then become one. The singularity, the mixing of iron and clay, as the scripture speaks about in Daniel. This is how Satan makes gods in his image. We're not going to be made in the image of God if we're following transhumanism. We're going to be made into Satan's image. The mixture of iron and clay. This is what they want. The ultimate connection between the two. And imagine having your brain downloaded to some internet server or internet memory bank or whatever it's called, so that you're then the fount of all knowledge. And of course, this was seen back in Genesis, wasn't it? We can't let man build that tower, and we can't let them get to that stage, because what does Scripture say in Genesis? There'll be nothing impossible for them to not achieve. And of course, this is the stated goal of the World Economic Forum. It's the stated goal of many billionaires. There are many thoughts about Mr. Musk. The transhuman agenda, the idea of merging biology and technology. And of course, the technocrats, this is what they're planning in their smart cities and their smart workplaces. Of course, everything becomes smart, doesn't it? The Internet of Things. Everything tracked, everything traced, everything monitored, everything presented to this new God, the God of the cloud. Not the God that's coming in the clouds, but the God of the cloud. And this attempt is going to be basically an attempt to merge man and machine. And of course, referring back again to this, another technocratic invention, biology mixed with technology. The transhuman agenda, the bionic man. Of course, we've seen it in the films, haven't we? Mr. Schwarzenegger and his bionic powers. And I've spoken before about wokeness, my whole idea of social justice, and the way that these lies are being spilt out. The idea that if you have a certain color skin, then you're a hater of people that have a different color skin. The dissemination of hate, the idea that, in a false concept, that people of this color have only been haters of people of other color. An absolute lie. And of course, it's disseminated into politics, it's disseminated everywhere. And now, of course, the woke movement is now spreading this concept. So I'm gonna finish off with just saying here that this merger of idea, this merger of thought is all preparing itself for the coming of those two men, the false prophet and the Antichrist. Wherever there's a truth, there's a lie. Wherever there's something real, there's something counterfeit. And the two are drawing very close together now. And it's going to be more and more difficult to discern between the two. But there is a preparation. That preparation is taking place now. The spirit of Antichrist is in the world. As it says in John, there have been many Antichrists and there have been many false prophets. But we're beginning to see now that we're coming to a stage where that trinity of evil is going to rise its head. The beast, the Antichrist, the second beast, the false prophet, all powered by the dragon, Satan. And they've been shaping our world, especially over the last 2 years. And I just pray that we can all be alert to what's going on, because things are changing so rapidly, so quickly. We need that discernment from the Lord more than ever. We need to walk closely with him.